Good afternoon again. Many thanks for joining this EOSC Future workshop. The main topic is how to make your research products discoverable in the EOSC portal. And the main agenda and the main topics will be the EOSC portal and onboarding to the EOSC Marketplace, the procedures to onboard data sources and research products, and also accounting for research products using the UsageCounts service. We will start with a brief welcome and introduction. And between each topic, we will have a dedicated time for questions and answers. Okay, so during the presentation of each topic, you can, if you have comments or questions, you can use the Q&A section to put your questions. And at the end of each topic, we will have time to answer them. Okay. At the middle, we will have a short break, as our session is a bit long. We will have a short break, and then we resume for the accounting for research products part. And now, just to know more about you, about your role, about your experience onboarding services or other kind of resources in the EOSC portal. I will open here some questions, easy questions, let's say, just to know more about you. I'm launching the first question. Hopefully you are seeing the following question. What's your role in the context of the EOSC portal? And we are asking if you are a provider representative, a data source manager, or other role. A provider representative are those that are representing an organization, for example, a university that can register a data source, for example. So the majority until now, looking to the answers, are other kind of roles. So I should have more options. If you want, you can write in the chat what is your role, just for us to know more. Second place, we have also some provider representatives, and 3 are data source managers. Okay. Thank you. I think we can close this one, and then I can show the results just for you to see also. And now another question. And it's about your organization. Is your organization already onboarded in the EOSC portal as a provider? In practice, we are asking if your organization is already registered as a provider in the EOSC portal. Okay, only 2 are already onboarded. 11, 12 are not until now. Okay. And some colleagues need to confirm, but because they are not sure if the organization is registered or not. Okay, we can close the poll, share the results. So I think this session will be very useful because as only 2 have already onboarded the organizations. So in the first part of this session, you will find useful information regarding the onboarding of organizations and some rules that you need to follow. Okay. Let's move to the third question. Have you onboarded any kind of resource into the EOSC portal? Looking to the previous question, I imagine that the majority have not onboarded any kind of resource, but let's see. Until now, the majority have no registered services or resources in the EOSC. Okay, I can close the poll and share the results. So only one registered a service. 2 participants registered or onboarded a data source, and 18 never registered any kind of resource. So this session will be useful for you for sure. At least we hope you will have the necessary information to onboard your resources in EOSC. And to conclude this part, we have a final question. And only for those that for the 3 participants that in fact onboarded a data source or a service, if they find any kind of issue or barrier or limitation in the onboarding process. So 2 found. I think I can close the poll and share the results. Only 2. No, 2 found 2 in 3 is a lot. 2 found some kind of issues or barriers, and only 1 didn't find any issue. Okay, if you would like to share the barrier or the difficulty you found in the process, you can share in the chat, for example. It will be relevant for us in order to try to improve some of the functionality or the support we can give to the users. Let me close the poll. Many thanks for your feedback. Let me check also the Q&A and the chat. We don't have any questions or comments. Okay, but during the meeting, if you would like to share some of your experiences, please feel free to add them in the chat. So now with this brief introduction and feedback from you that is useful for us, we can move forward to our first topic that will be presented by Milica. Milica is from EIFL, collaborates also in OpenAir and the EOSC feature projects, and will present us the EOSC portal and onboarding to the EOSC Marketplace. Welcome, Milica. If you want to present yourself also a bit longer than me, you can do it, and welcome.
That's quite enough.
Okay.
So I've been another thing that is important, that one of those who had issues and who responded in the poll was me. I was involved in the NEFOS Europe project, so I'm quite familiar with the onboarding process, and I'll try to explain this as clearly as possible, because the terminology that we are using is, well, is my presentation. The terminology that we are using is quite difficult to deal with, and it's sometimes not really clear to non-experts, and I'll try to avoid this jargon as much as possible. But please, if you don't understand any of the terms I'm using, just indicate this, and there are ways to replace those terms, like onboarding, for example. You will see later we can replace them with something that is more familiar to you. Basically, the process is not that complicated, but the whole concept and the whole context is quite quite complicated. So our context that we are discussing and that we are actually building is the Open Science, European Open Science Cloud. It's been around for a while. The term first appeared in 2015, and we started dealing with it very intensively since 2017. And actually, there are many ways to explain it. None of them is sufficiently clear. It's actually an initiative by the European Commission, and it's the final aim of this initiative is to create an environment which will be multidisciplinary, which will be open, which will also be an environment when open science is developed, it's encouraged. And this environment should involve all kinds of stakeholders, not only researchers, but mainly researchers. So researchers, companies, citizens, just everyone. The idea is to make the research outputs, especially the publicly funded research output, but not only those, available to various kinds of stakeholders, not necessarily as free, but primarily as fair, in line with the fair principles. And the idea is also to bring together various tools, services, infrastructures together, and to actually make a kind of an inventory to see what's been created, what's available, what's not available, what's working and what's not working. So it's quite difficult to explain it because people usually understand this as a space somewhere on the web where people store their data. European Open Science Cloud is not that. It offers resources for that, but it's not limited to that. So the right thing to say is usually, I find the term environment the most comprehensive and the most suitable to describe this kind of context. So the EOSC Future project is one of the, there is a list of projects on the EOSC portal. You will see it later. You will see the portal later. There is a list of projects that are related to EOSC. There are more than 60 projects that have been more or less dedicated or related to the development of EOSC. So EOSC Future is one of these such projects. It ends in September. And it's focused on, it's largely focused on infrastructure, but it's also related to the development of this common portal. And it also seeks to develop research, training materials, learning resources. And our webinar actually is one part of these activities, of this work package, striving to create this so that you have resources to learn yourself using some self-paced courses or listening to our webinars so that you learn along when the project is over. The most tangible and easiest to understand output of this effort related to the creation of the European Open Science Cloud is the EOSC portal. It's actually a web portal. It's very complex, but now it's quite integrated. It still changes, but less than over the past years. Over the past years, it's been changing all the time. Now it's quite integrated, and I don't expect major changes in its interface. So you have a search functionality there, and you can see, you can search the marketplace, and you can also search this web portal. It has various types of materials there. You can find the information about projects. You can find some very interesting use cases, and it's intended for all sorts of stakeholders. So this is actually a gateway to the other results related to the European Open Science Cloud. The most important part for us and for researchers of this portal is the EOSC Marketplace. So actually now you access it from the homepage of the EOSC portal. You have the search field, and then you can search anything. There are various types of resources there, and it supports searching and browsing, etc. So what is important for you to know is that these resources that are searched through this search interface are not actually stored on the EOSC portal. They are not stored on one single server. They are distributed all over Europe and even beyond Europe. And they are actually hosted on the servers of their providers. So providers, we will explain later, these are the institutions behind these resources. And actually what we have in this EOSC Marketplace is a catalog. These are just metadata records describing these resources. So resources, this is the term that we used to cover, you can see on the right, and you can see the list on the left, all these types of documents, of stuff. So these are services, these are data sources. Data sources are usually repositories or aggregators. I will explain later what's the difference between data sources and, for example, services. Research products, so publications, data, software, etc., and other stuff, other types of resources like learning resources and any other that cannot be classified into any of these groups. So all of these things are called resources, and all of these things are subgroups within this overarching term resources. And what is important is that we, in this project, metadata schemas have been developed to describe these resources. So Marketplace is actually a catalog. It is a registry where you have metadata records. And in order to make these metadata records consistent, various metadata schemas have been developed to ensure this consistency, to ensure that various providers describe their resources in the same way. And these are links. You will get a presentation. These are links where you can go and check how these metadata schemas look. And this is one of them. This is the resource profile. So this is a generic type of thing. And you can see, so people who are working with repositories, librarians, repository managers, this looks quite familiar to them. So there are codes for fields because there are some regional catalogs. So in order to ensure consistency with other catalogs and other registries, these fields have codes, but this is clear to you. These are field names, attribute names, actually field names in the database, definitions, descriptions of the fields, types of fields, and here you can see whether they are mandatory or not mandatory, and whether they are publicly displayed or not. So this is similar to any metadata schema used in a repository on a library catalog. But this is adjusted to the needs and to the resources that will be described in this marketplace, actually catalog and marketplace. So this is how a record about a service looks on the in this marketplace. So this is a description, basic information, links to how to reach training information, how to access the user manual, etc., and also some other information about the governance, about the technical maturity, etc. So this is a curated kind of catalog, and this information is detailed. All these providers who want to register their resources, they have to fill out these mandatory fields, and they have to meet some requirements. So it's not just a place where anybody can register anything. This is a kind of controlled and curated, and there will be curation. Some curation will be occasionally carried out to check whether all these records are okay or not, and also providers committed that they will be maintaining these records. Research product is another type of resource, and it has a different, slightly different metadata schema, and this is how it is displayed. And it's what is important. Also, these research products are not stored there; they're in other repositories, publication platforms, etc. But here you can have links how to access, where to access, and what of these are open or not. Sometimes it may happen that one link is open, the other is not. So it's a good way to find resources. And this is powered by the open air research graph. So this search and actually display of research product is powered by open air research graph, which is relevant for what you will hear later in other presentations when explaining the procedure to onboard, because today we will be talking about the onboarding of data sources, but the final aim is to have research products in the marketplace. So who can become a provider? How to become a provider? It's very important that provider is an organization. It's not an individual person. It's an organization or part of an organization. It has to be a legal entity. So there are various types of providers depending on what they are providing. So resource providers, service providers, aggregators, etc. And also providers, they have to be registered in this marketplace as well. We call it onboarded to the marketplace. So providers are onboarded, and research data are onboarded, services are onboarded. So this onboarding is actually a kind of registration in this registry, to translate it into everyday language. So these providers also have to, their descriptions have to conform to a metadata schema, similar to that one applying to resources. So an EOSC provider is a legal entity. So if you're not a legal entity, for example, if you're a department at the university, your university can do the onboarding. Actually, the university can be provider. So there is usually a kind of a hosting entity that can be a provider. So that's important to know, and that's important to discuss with your institution before you start the onboarding process. Otherwise, you will encounter some issues and it will not run smoothly. So it's very important to know this. Also, in case of some federated or jointly provided resources, for example, if an infrastructure or a consortium is involved in the development of a service or an aggregator or another resource that should be onboarded to the EOSC marketplace, you should discuss who will be the lead provider, and the lead provider will have to register as a provider and do the onboarding, but the other institutions will also have to register there. So this is a kind of an organizational issue. It's not difficult once you know all the rules in advance, and then you can discuss this, and when you start the onboarding procedure, it will run smoothly. This is the provider profile. This is a metadata schema. You will see later where it's used, metadata schema, and it's good to have a look at it in order to know what kind of information you should prepare. So there is a link. And what kind of information you need to prepare, and especially what kind of information is mandatory. So this is how a provider page looks. So this is an onboarded provider, OpenAir. OpenAir is a legal entity, and this is how its profile looks at the EOSC Marketplace. So the process of onboarding is not really too complicated. It's carried out through the EOSC portal. There is a providers hub, a dedicated area, and this is an area where you can find not only the forms that you have to fill out in order to onboard, but also all sorts of the documentation and actually the instructions and guidelines how to do this. And it's very important to say that these guidelines are now written in a way that is really accessible for most users. Previously, they were not. They were quite complicated, but there was several iteration and a huge effort was involved in making them more legible and more accessible to ordinary users. So it's very important, because this is a question that it doesn't occur to us, but it's usually asked by potential providers. Are there any costs? Do you have to pay a fee in order to be included in the registry? No, it's free of charge. So the process is free of charge, and the maintenance of your records and their presence in the marketplace is free of charge. So there are no charges involved. And yes, this is the place where this process starts. And if you want to, you have to onboard the provider first. And this is the button that you click to onboard as a new provider, and then you will see the rest of the process. So, but in order to make a decision whether to onboard or not, you have to discuss this at your institution and to explain. And usually the management, they ask, so what are the benefits of this process? Why should we go into this process? It's, we have to dedicate people, they have to dedicate their time, they have to study the instructions. So why would we do this? It's very important, especially if you're a repository manager, you have a repository or an aggregator. It's very important because you're gaining visibility in this way. So it's usually for researchers, this is a sufficient benefit, and they usually get encouraged to get into the process when they learn that they will get additional visibility. But also as a provider, it's very good because you get a free platform, and in this platform you can, for example, onboard multiple resources. You can manage, you can update records there. It's not difficult to do this. It also, you can get support. Also, you can track the usage of your resources. You get some statistical information. So for example, for us as repository managers, I'm one of them, it's very interesting to have an insight into this kind of information, because you see, when you have to show the value of your work, this is a good way you can show some statistics. Also, there is another thing that is also very important, that there are some, we call them core services, like, for example, help desk monitoring, accounting for, the accounting that will be presented in the second part of today's workshop is actually one of these core services. So these are services that add value to your resources. For example, you don't necessarily have a help desk as a repository or an aggregator, but if you integrate your service in the EOSC Marketplace, you can integrate a help desk, and this is a ticketing system, a quite complex one and very professional one, that you can use to manage user requests for your resource. Also, you get monitoring information. For example, you're informed if a certificate for your service is about to expire, or whether it was down or working, whether it was available or not. Also, for those charging, requiring payment for their services, they can manage orders using these core services. They can integrate these core services. So this is a significant benefit, because developing these services yourself usually costs and usually requires IT staff that you may not necessarily have. Also, another benefit is that users will be able to use the single sign-on feature, so they will be able to use their social, meaning Google or ORCID credentials, or they can, or institutional credentials to log into your service, or to log into the EOSC portal. So that these are basically the benefits, and it's important to explain this to the management. So the process of onboarding, this is the scheme, and it's quite simple. So you go to Providers Hub, click onboard as a new provider, and then you are prompted to log in using one of these options. And when you log in, you log in with your ORCID profile, for example, if you don't have if your institution is not integrated in AI. And then you are prompted to accept the privacy policy, and actually to confirm that you are not authorized by your institution. So it's important to discuss this with your institution in advance, so that you are really authorized. And then when you check this, you get a form that you have to fill out. This is the form that you have to fill out in order to register a new provider. And these are the 9 sections. And these fields in the form are actually based on this provider profile, on this table that I showed you. I said that you could check the mandatory fields. And the mandatory fields and there are whole sections that are mandatory are marked with this asterisk. And then you have actually to fill out these fields. It's quite extensive. It's good to prepare this information in advance, but it's not really difficult. I mean, you can manage. So you fill out the form, and then you submit. When you finish, there is a kind of an automated check where you actually, if, for example, you're required to add a URL and it's not okay, then you are prompted to make corrections. So there is a kind of an automated check, a technical check, and then after you submit, there is the EOSC Portal onboarding team, and this is a cross project team. These are not people from one project, from one institution, and they actually review the provider profile, and they can actually return it and require you to submit, to provide additional information or submit. If it's okay, they approve it, and when it's approved, you become publicly visible in the marketplace, and you get this kind of profile that I showed previously. And then it's only then that you can proceed to register the first resource. So you first confirm that you log in as an authorized provider's representative. Then you register a provider, fill out the form. Basically, this is filling out the form and being patient until you get response. And then you fill out another form. So you log in again, and then you click a button to onboard the first resource, and then you fill out another form. So I don't have it here, but you will see it later in the demo. It's very similar to the provider's form. It has 11 sections. You fill out this form, and then there is this automated check, and then it's approved by the same team, the EPOT team. And it's only the first submission that is approved. The others are automatically accepted. So after that, you can onboard more resources. If you have, for example, more repositories, or you have a repository and a service, you can do this. You don't have to go through this check. It's important that you can use an API, and there was a training about it. So here you have the training. These webinars are publicly available, how to onboard manually and how to onboard using the APIs. It's more for technical stuff. And if you have more resources, more than one, and you need to update it occasionally, then it's a better option. But if you don't, the manual is equally good. And then this is the end of this. This is what you have to do in order to onboard. So there is a question, and we are usually asked this question: what is a service and what is a data source? And for you, this important question is whether a repository or an aggregator is a service or it's a data source. Basically, the procedure to onboard, the first part of the procedure, is the same. So what I've shown, this is the same. The other part is not the same, what you will hear later. So the main question is, what is a service? Service is a way to provide, etc., some value to customers or to users, and these are the things that are considered service. Data source is a subgroup of services. The typical feature of a data source is that it contains some data. So it's a service, but it contains some data. And if you are onboarding something at a data source, registering as a data source, this is because you want its content to be visible in the marketplace. So basically, this is the question. If you want to offer the repository or an aggregator to others as a service, then it's a service. If you don't want the data to be displayed in the marketplace, you register it just as a service. But if you want the content of this repository to be available in the marketplace, then you onboard it as also as a data source. So actually, when onboarding, you indicate that it is a data source, and then follow the procedure that will be explained later by Andre. The example that a repository can be both at the same time is Zenodo, because it's offered to researchers as a service, but also the records from Zenodo are available in the marketplace. So I think it's quite clear. It depends on what you want, but it can be both, but it depends on what you want. And this is a scheme of the procedure. This is what I've explained. So you have in the EOSC Marketplace, we are using these icons. So this is an icon for service, and this is an icon for data source. And you can see this indicates that there is something inside. So this is the procedure that I explained. You register provider, you register the service, and then it's available in the marketplace as a service. If you onboard the data source, this is the procedure that applies to services. Register as a provider, register as a service. It's available as a service. But then there is the second part that will be explained now, and then the research products are actually available in the EOSC Marketplace. So that's all from me.
Okay, many thanks, Milica, for our presentation, and I think it's very clear. It was very clear. on how to onboard, the main issues or topics that needs to be addressed. So now we have some time to answer some questions. We have a question from Annalena. I'm not sure if we can answer it right now or just after the second topic. But the question was, our metadata discovery portal has been onboarded as a service for a while, but does not show as a data source. We do not know why. Who is the official contact for resolving this?
I'll try to answer this because I'm having a similar issue. So I onboarded some stuff through the NIFOS regional catalog. And then I cannot edit the records in the EOSC Marketplace, in my dashboard in the EOSC Marketplace, and I cannot reassign. Actually, I cannot mark my resources as data sources, and this is still not resolved. But I warmly recommend contacting the help desk. So the EOSC Marketplace has a help desk. I will share an address there. They are quite responsive. And for my case, for example, is quite specific, and they will see whether it can be resolved and how it can be resolved. So the things are still developing, so do contact the help desk.
Okay, thank you, Melita. Let me see. We have another question from Emilio Pacheco. OpenAir is a provider, and if a university already sends information from an institutional repository, for instance, to the OpenAir, should that university be onboarding in EOSC?
Definitely yes. So there was a confusion because for 2 or 3 years we believed that this wouldn't be necessary. And we believe that our repositories will be automatically there. But actually, this is a federated infrastructure, and you have different entities responsible and different parts of the system, and it's very important to have to do these things, to have a repository harvested by OpenAir, but to onboard the institution to the marketplace. It's not difficult. So Andre will show the procedure, and I think that it will be clear after that.
Okay, thank you, Melita. And we have another question from Simsha. Are all the services free? Can a company upload a service that has a cost?
There are services that involve costs, but what is good about the EOSC Marketplace is that this information is transparent. So when onboarding, a service has to indicate whether it is open access or not, whether there are some limitations, whether there are some conditions. And also, I didn't mention it because we didn't have the time to this, but if you're onboarding a service, you need to have a privacy policy in terms of use. So these policies have to be quite clear. And also, it's okay to offer some packages, some services for money, but you have to be transparent to this. And also for these services, the EOSC Marketplace has this order management core service that can be integrated with them, and that can actually support them in managing these orders. And also there are services that are not open access, that are not paid, but you actually have to contact the provider and negotiate the conditions. For example, if you're doing a specific kind of research, they will enable you access, but these services are not part. So there are various modalities, but the good thing is that this information is quite transparent in the EOSC Marketplace.
Okay, thank you, Melita. So we answered all the questions. If anyone would like to add something else, we have some time. If not, we can, let me see, yes, I think we have something in the Q&A. Okay, we have a question from Tom. What is the difference between EOSC and OpenAir?
So it's the same as asking what is the difference between Zenodo and OpenAir. So the OpenAir is actually many things: an infrastructure, entity, a legal entity. OpenAir offers a set of services. So you probably mean OpenAir Explore when you say OpenAir. There is also another service OpenAir provides. OpenAir Explore is an aggregator and a discovery platform. Actually, it is based on an aggregator, which is behind, but it's a discovery platform that shows the aggregated records from various repositories. EOSC Marketplace is a catalog that doesn't cover only research products. It seeks to bring together services, the research products, and all kinds of stuff that I explained, all sorts of resources. So it's much broader, and it's structured more strictly, I would say structured, because it seeks to be a kind of a registry, a curated registry. So basically, I don't know whether I'm clear enough, but these things are quite different. OpenAir provides, there is a relationship, because OpenAir Research Graph, this is the service behind the discovery platform. OpenAir Explore fuels these metadata records into the for research products into the EOSC Marketplace. So they are related.
Okay, thank you, Melita. Tom has a new question, and I think you already answered. Is there an integration between EOSC and OpenAir?
So I think that's what I've explained. They are integrated, and it's not only the good thing about the EOSC Marketplace and the EOSC Portal is it's federated. So you have behind. You have various infrastructures providing, for example, software running the service catalog. So you have service catalog, you have data research products catalog, you have various catalogs, but they're unified visually, they're unified technically. But this is a federated infrastructure. So it provides some resources to the like other services also provide other resources to the marketplace.
Okay, thank you, Melita. And we have another question from Jan. If I register a resource as both as a service and as a data source, are these metadata records somehow linked? For example,
this is the
two
same
records
metadata
from...
record.
Okay.
This is the same metadata record. So it's probably just the fields has some additional fields that, but this is the same. I checked for Zenodo, the link is, the URL is the same. So I was also puzzled. So it's a merged record, but you know, we are using those tags. So you can tag the resources that can have multiple tags. So yes.
Okay, thank you, Melita. And I think we answered all the questions. Yes, many thanks for your questions. And now I think we can move to the second topic of our workshop. So let me share my screen just to. Okay. So now we will have Andreas Czerniak and Sabil Sa from the Bielefeld University Library. They are also part of the EOSC onboarding team and collaborates also with EOSC Future and OpenAir projects. And the topic is it's about the procedures to onboard data sources and research products. Welcome, Sabil and Andreas. I will stop sharing my screen and give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, welcome on my behalf, on Andreas as well. We are working in Bielefeld University Library. And in this section, we will take a look at the procedures to onboard data sources and research products. So in the first section, the data sources that I will cover, and in the second section, the research products, my colleague Andreas will cover that. Okay, so to onboard a research product, we have to go through 3 phases. In the first phase, the provider is onboarded, as we saw earlier in Melissa's presentation. Then this provider is registered. And in the phase C, in the last phase, the actual resource of this provider is onboarded. And all these 3 phases, they are validated by a dedicated team of EPOT, which stands for EOSC Portal onboarding team. So internally, we have this structure of onboarding process. In the first, from 1 to 5, we have already seen that to some extent, the onboarding of the provider, where in the first authorized representative of the provider registers in the EOSC portal. Once he is authenticated, he becomes a ARP, authorized and authenticated representative of the provider. He logs into the EOSC portal, and he or she asserts that for the authorization of the provider. And then after this assertion in step 4, he applies to be onboarded as a provider. Once this application is sent, the EPOT, the team, it reviews this application, and in the 6th step, it selects the method of onboarding this resource. It can be, as we saw earlier, it can be either through a web form or through an API. And in the 7th stage, the resources on the application for onboarding of resources submitted. And in 8th, this application is reviewed by the team whether it complies with the set of rules and regulations. And once this resource is onboarded, the AARP can apply for further resources for onboarding of that. And in the final step, quality team, EOSC Portal quality team creates a report of the whole process. So this is a detailed view of the onboarding of a data source. So it consists of 7 steps. In the first step, a data source profile is selected. So it can be either open door, fair sharing, R3 data, or DRIS. And in the second step, it's validated. Data source is validated by the EOSC Portal onboarding team. And then once it's successfully validated, the data source is onboarded. It takes a few days for it to appear in the marketplace. And once it's onboarded, as we have seen in Melissa's presentation, we get some services for us. So there's a monitoring service, accounting, and help desk. And as Melissa said, even if we don't have in our system, and the provider does not offer any help desk on their platform, in EOSC, you can get the dedicated help desk. And once we have onboarded the data source, we can move on to step 4 for onboarding of research product, which we will see in the next section of this presentation. So now we will take a look at the first phase. where authorized representative is onboarded. We will not go too much detail because Melissa has already mentioned most of these points, but here we see internally how it works. So we visit this page for becoming a provider. Click on the Apply Now button, and using AAI, we can choose our institute if it's in the list. Otherwise, there are also options available which we can use to get access to it. And in the next step, we log in, and now the button to apply to become a provider is available to us. And once we click it, we have to agree to certain terms and conditions. First is the code of conduct of EOSC. Then we have the privacy policy, and whether we are the provider, the representative is actually authorized by the institute to become the representative on EOSC. Once all these three checkboxes are checked, and then this application is submitted. Then we move to the next step, where the provider actually fills in the forms to apply to become the provider. So some of the fields are mandatory, and they are denoted by asterisk sign. And once we fill all those, we can submit our form. And if we are feeling any problems, encounter any problems, we can email on onboarding@eosportal.eu. Or we can also have a one-to-one call if there's a need for that. So this is also a possibility. Once this form is submitted, which includes the basic information, marketing information, classification, location, contact, other information, and administrative information, this application is sent to the ePort. And on the web page, we see the status of our provider application as pending. On the back end, the EOSC Portal onboarding team, they get a notification that application has been submitted. A ticket is automatically generated in the Jira system, and the provider also gets an email that the application has been submitted for review. And while they have submitted the application, they can still update the information they already have provided in the application, and this change will be reflected in the application. So next is the review of this application. The ePort team reviews this application against certain requirements, which Melissa has mentioned earlier, that it needs to be a legal entity, which can be a research infrastructure, core facilities, or shared scientific resource. And it should be operating at European, national, or regional or institutional level. And it should be the entity registering the resource and operating by itself. And it should be an independent legal entity. So all these checks are performed on this application. And the application is either accepted, or if there are some modifications needed, then the provider is contacted. So now the provider has been onboarded. They can log into their account, and they can onboard a resource now. And as we saw earlier, that there are two ways to onboard the resource, either through a web interface or through an API. And for API, there's a dedicated tutorial, which Melissa has mentioned earlier. And if you have a mass level of resources which you want to onboard using automated scripts, you can use an API. Otherwise, if you have a limited number of resources or data sources, in this case, you can use the web interface. So here on your provider webpage, you can click on the Add Resource Template button, and this will add a new data source. It will lead you to new data source web page. So this is also a web form which you have to fill with many fields, and the mandatory fields are with the static, and each field has its own data type. For example, if it's an email field, it has to have a valid email address. Client-side check is performed. So if it's an error in it, you get a pop-up that it needs to be corrected. Once this application is submitted, the EOSC Portal onboarding team, it checks this application against a certain criteria. And if there are smaller issues which the EOSC Portal onboarding team can fix by itself, for example, typos or some other errors, it can correct it and notify the provider. And if there are some other issues which needs the provider's input, then they are contacted to correct it. If there are no anomalies, then the application is accepted in this stage. So now I invite my colleague Andreas to go through the procedure to onboard research products.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon from my side. Yes, my name is Andreas Czerniak from Bielefeld University Library as well. We are at Bielefeld University Library responsible for data source integration and then assist here the ePort team as well as the OpenAIR team for data source integration and for integration of research products especially. Could I share my screen, or would you like to?
You can share it.
Okay. So hopefully you see the screen.
Yes.
So full mode. Yes, so in this part, I will cover the part of research onboarding of research products. As Zabi mentioned before, there are different steps to onboard a data source in step 1 till 4 in this picture. And it is, and as this mentioned also in the previous message by Milicia, that there's a need for registration, a data source in OpenAIR. OpenAIR provides a service to aggregate research products from scholarly endpoints. And this is for more than 2,000 data sources done worldwide since many years. But in some cases, the data sources are not really registered, or the research products are not harvested by these data sources yet. But we will see in the next slides how we can do this. In the scholarly communication, we have different types of research products. As you all know, publications, or namely literature, articles, theses, and preprints are available, as well as data sets in data collections or as bioentities, as well as software, as research software, also, also patents, data management plans, workflows, interactive services and resources, and additional things which is beyond research product itself, but it's also a research entity for projects, funding, organization units, and so on. And These could be found in different types of repositories or information systems. And on institutional path and thematic repositories, we find this in journals as well for articles, especially data repositories, software repositories, and last but not least, the CRIS systems or RIM systems, research information systems. And all these repositories covers all these types of research products. And if you can see here, the difference, institutional covers literature, covers data sets, covers also software and data management plans, patents. Data repositories mostly covers data sets, of course. And if we fulfill the picture here, then we see that CRIS Systems covers all of these things. And especially for research product onboarding, we will take a look mostly to institutional and thematic repositories, as well as data repositories and software repositories. And in OpenAI, we take a look beyond. Important for research product onboarding via EOSC Data Source, Melissa has something to say about this, is that the data source is compliant to the interoperability framework guidelines for research products. What does this mean? This means that the research product should have a specific format, which is widely used in the scholarly communications currently. And these formats use also vocabularies. In this case, and in the current situation of onboarding of research products, there are 4 guidelines from OpenAI that are used for the research product onboarding and harvesting. This first is the guidelines for institutional thematic repositories, which covers literature as we see, data sets, software, and so on. And to make a backward compatibility is also to have you could also use as a repository the literature repository version 3 guidelines. This is a little bit, this covers mostly literature, and the third one is the OpenAI guidelines for data archives, version 2, which is based on OAI, on data schema, but use identifiers beyond DOIs and use also the importance of vocabularies. And especially for this one, I meant for data archives, the vocabulary from InfoEO Repro is used by the guidelines, as well as the core vocabulary. And last but not least is here also the CRIS guidelines for CRIS managers, which covers all the entities that we have seen before. And this use the serif metadata format for this. In the case of EOSC, we have mostly currently two scenarios. The first scenario is that the data source is already harvested by OpenAir, and the research products are already in the OpenAir research graph. That what we see before is the fundamental of the EOSC research product catalog. In this case, currently, if the data source is approved, EOSC data source is approved by the ePort team, and the research products from this endpoint is already available in OpenAir, then nothing more is to do, and we will see that I see this is not correct, but we'll see. The research product will be available very soon, 1 to 3 weeks or so. The second part is the research products are not being harvested by OpenAir. So the data source is not known in OpenAir, and the aggregation, the first aggregation in OpenAir is not done. Then we will check all the ePort will check the compliant level of these endpoint, of the given endpoint, and make the research products harvested by the OpenAir aggregation system. And if is in the best case, if all is going smooth well, then the research product will be visible after 1 month in the marketplace of EOSC. What should be done by onboarding of a research product afterwards? So as you've seen in the steps before, we should log into another service called Provide OpenAir. Then you should claim your data source there. This is especially for existing data sources. The ePort team will approve these ones, will check your endpoint against guidelines, and will create the harvesting jobs afterwards, and then on a periodic base, the harvesting will take place for your endpoint. Only the endpoint needs an approval by the team, and after the harvesting is for first research products is done from your endpoint, then additional research products from your endpoint should not be approved anymore, so it will be automatically visible in the EOSC portal. In this case, as the presenters shown before, the data sources in EOSC have a more stricter legal boundaries, and this is also done for the research products that we are harvesting for the EOSC. The OpenAir research graph covers the whole one of the data sources that OpenAir knows. Only the ones that are onboarded in the EOSC and onboarded as a research product, as an endpoint here in this provide service, will be visible in the marketplace. I will say in a second. So to join OpenAir, mostly I think familiar with this, go through the OpenAir provide.openair.eu website, and on this you have full control of your data source and endpoints and aggregation from your endpoints and additional services that will be shown also by my colleague Dimitris afterwards. If you log in, and you could choose different AAIs for this, you could register your repository in this endpoint. I've shown here some slides and pictures from the Provide dashboard, and for your especially for your repository or data archive, it will be seen a little bit different. But the way to register this data source is equal to the others. In this case, you can choose your country, and from the registry that we shown before, you can find different sources and select your resource here, your data source, and it will be pre-filled the forms in the Provide dashboard for registration with names, with endpoints, with compliant levels, with certain things. And at least at the last step, you should agree on the term of use of your metadata, as well as the reuse of the full text if it's available through your endpoint. A short overview of this is on the left-hand side, you see the EOS compliant data source, your EOS compliant data source, which is registered on the endpoint in the OpenAir aggregation system. If it's integrated, first integrated and harvested and approved by the team, the aggregation system will be harvesting your endpoint on a weekly basis. And the OpenAir research graph will be created or is created every month and will be available in the EOSC research as an EOSC research product catalog dedicated with the EOS compliant data sources after once a month. So it takes once a month for a first integration and approval of the data source and visibility in the EOSC research product catalog. After your research products are harvested by OpenAir and all the steps are approved, then you will find your service, your data source, your research products, and it's called so to say, sorry, and publications, data sets, software, as well as training resources and interoperability guidelines and others in the marketplace of EOSC. And my presenters before have shown you some slides on this as well. In this case, we would like to thank you for your participation and attention for this topic, and I think we open the question and answers section. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks, Andres and Sabil, for your presentation. So as Andre said, we have time now for some questions and answers. So feel free to raise your hand or write your question in the Q&A functionality. We have some time to answer your questions or clarify some doubts you may have regarding this onboarding of research products. Sometimes there are some questions about the visibility of research products in the EOSC Marketplace. If you have some questions or doubts, feel free to add.
Let me add something more regarding the research products. In this time, everyone could ask a question. The research products, if you take a look to the marketplace of EOSC Portal, you will see only a subset of research products. Like in OpenAir, we have more than 230 million of deduplicated records in our Explore portals. And in the EOSC Marketplace, you only have around about 6 or 8 million records currently, because on the trusted data sources and the trust in the onboarding of those data sources. So if you apply for the onboarding of a data source, then this is as a trusted data source in EOSC, and only these research products are visible in the EOSC Marketplace, not the whole one from the OpenAir research graph.
Elitsa, please.
But also, I believe that if a provider is not onboarded, their records are not visible in the EOSC Marketplace, and this is, I believe, our case. So if a service if a provider and the service are not onboarded on the EOSC Marketplace, the records are not visible, although they are harvested by OpenAir.
Yes, indeed. So
Yeah.
if the data source is not onboarded or the provider is not onboarded, which is a previous step to onboard a data source or a service, then this is not visible in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. We have some additional time for questions. If you have some, please feel free to add. Annalena, please.
Yeah, hi. I have a quite concrete question. So our metadata, we are an aggregator of metadata, be defined, and we are registered as a service, as a provider in EOSC Portal, and we are being harvested by OpenAir. So what we are missing is still this little tag data source in the EOSC Marketplace. So the concrete next step, if I understood everything correctly, would be to register as a data source in EOSC Portal, right? I can't do this via OpenAir because that, no, okay. Yes, please.
May I, or
Please.
Milicia? Regarding B2Find or your aggregator endpoint, and your question also in the chat regarding service and data source. Currently, there are some developments on this, and a data source is a subset of a service. So if you register a data source, then you have all the fields for a service and additional fields of which is required for a data source. Currently, we are in the phase to manage and change existing data sources and services, or vice versa, in the provider portal. So so to say, the EPO team is aware of your request, and if it's possible through the components to change, to add the data source profile to your existing service, then we will come back to you soon.
So I don't have to do anything. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andres. Thank you, Annalena. I don't know if you would like to add something else, Milica? No? Okay. Okay, so I think we are done for this part. And additional to the registration in OpenAir Provide and the OpenAir guidelines. If some of you have some doubts regarding the registration or about the application of the OpenAir guidelines, you can also contact the OpenAir team. I'm putting in the chat the help desk email you can use to contact us, so we can help you regarding the compatibility with of your data source with OpenAir guidelines, and also to be eligible to be onboarded in the EOSC portal.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
It's a workshop.
Yes.
So we have 30 participants here, and I would like to know if your repository is which techniques do you use on your endpoints for your repository? The OpenAir guidelines are covers the OAI PMH protocol mostly, well, in this case. And do you have further additional protocols that you are used on your repository side to expose your metadata to further components? Please share your techniques or protocols in the chat. Thank you.
You can do it using chat, for example, or if you want to, you can also open your microphone to present and to answer the Andres question. So now we will have Dimitris Pierrakos, that is the OpenAir UsageCounts product manager and collaborates also with the EOSC Future project. And Dimitris will present us the accounting for research products using the UsageCounts service in order to measure the impact of research products. So I'm giving the floor to Dimitris. Thank you, Dimitris. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre, for the introduction. Let me share my screen. So, hello, good afternoon. I'm Dimitris Pierrakos, and I work as in OpenAir as a part of the technical team, and I am the developer and product manager of the OpenAir UsageCounts service, which is the service developed by OpenAir to analyze the usage activity and build usage statistics. Usage statistics provide a kind of an alternative way to measure the impact of the research and complement traditional scholarly impact indicators. And I will dive into more detail during this presentation. So an overview of this presentation. First, I will present a short introduction to the concept of user statistics, why they are important, as well as what are the available standards for acquiring and exchanging user statistics. Then I will present the EOSC product accounting and the UsageCounts service, which is used for its operation. We will present the service architecture and how a data source can engage with the service, as well as some results that show how the service is deployed. An interesting part of this presentation will be the future developments, since we will discuss the updates in the user statistics concepts after the employment of a new standard. So what are the user statistics? Why do we bother building and working with them? User statistics are based on the processing of usage events, and usage events are triggered by accessing the digital objects in content providers like repositories, journals, and CRIS Systems. Digital objects, like Andrea said, are articles, datasets, theses, books, etc. And once triggered, the usage event could be a metadata view of the digital object, or, for example, a visit on the metadata page of an article, or a full text download. User statistics are important not only for content providers, but also for a variety of stakeholders like publishers, aggregators, funders, even policymakers. For many libraries, for many data sources, user statistics are a required element of the regular reporting to funding and accreditation agencies. User statistics can also play a role in driving bibliographic extraction, internal marketing, and the development of the provider's own website. For example, for publishers, the number of full-text requests for a given journal is also a strong indicator of its impact. In terms also of marketing, monitoring usage over time is a good way of determining the effectiveness of various content and marketing or campaigning strategies that may be implemented. Finally, for aggregators like publishers with larger services, they might want user statistics not only to assist with collection management, but also to help with the overall management of the service. Monitoring, for example, full text retrieval over time helps with capacity planning and allows these services to plan ahead for growth and even some peaks. So user statistics is also a logical choice as another impact measure that will supplement citation counts. Digital readership information can be easily and routinely collected. Another aspect is that the bibliometric indicators do not show the usage of a published work by non-authors, such as students, academics, non-academic users who do not usually publish but may read scholarly publications. And finally, usage-based statistics for academic publication give a better understanding of the usage patterns of documents and can be more recent than other bibliometric indicators. So on the data provider level, user statistics can serve repository managers and hosting institutions as a tool to evaluate the success of the publication platform. On the individual item level, on the other side, they can demonstrate popular publications to authors and readers. User statistics on the item level can reflect the relevance of a particular research output of topics of data sources over the course of time and up to the present. So they are considered an important indicator to analyze the trends. So since we discussed the importance of user statistics, we have also to add what are the available standards. The standards that are used to build a common language to collect and change, and most importantly, compare user statistics among content providers come from the Counter project, which stands for Count and Online Usage of Network Electronic Sources. So Counter is a non-profit organization supported by a global community of library, publisher, and web members who contribute to the development of the code of practice through working groups and outreach. So Counter Code of Practice is considered the national standard used by librarians, publishers, and other content providers for reporting user statistics and exchanging user statistics for electronic resources in a standardized way. So Counter standardized user reports allow providers to compare usage easily across different publishers and platforms, access user activity related to their content, and improve user experience, inform renewal and new publishing decisions, justified budget, inform faculty power users about the value and use of current library resources, and derive cost per use for content. So let's dig now to the EOSC accounting for research product service. The EOSC accounting for research product service is the actual user statistics service offered by EOSC. The service, as other user statistics service, aggregates user indicators for different types of EOSC research products. Again, the research products could be datasets, articles, books, and etc. The EOSC accounting for research products is a core service and used to deploy research product metrics to show their impact. User statistics by means of user downloads are collected and made available. They are integrated with the EOSC Resource Portal catalog, and in particular, the enrichment of EOSC resource catalog with user statistics indicators, which are visible to end users, are offered in the dump of the catalog, which is published in Zenodo. The EOSC Research Product Accounting Service is part of the virtual access metrics accounting system of EOSC, and the research product accounting is operated by OpenAir UsageCounts service. The UsageCounts service is part of the onboarding of the EOSC research product process. So when a data source is registered via OpenAir Provide, the data source manager has also the option to register for the UsageCount service. Just to mention that the research products on board in OpenAir, they are becoming part of the OpenAir graph, which is the main structure of OpenAir information and comprised of interlinked scientific products with access rights information linked to funding information in the research community. So OpenAir graph provides a model for the representation information, and OpenAir uses to represent objects in the scholarly communication domain and the relationships that exist among them. So UsageCounts simply counts the products that are available in the OpenAir graph. So how we do it, how the service operates, we have two different approaches for building user statistics. The first approach is based on the push workflow, which is depicted in the upper part of the figure. This approach is based on the Matomo analytic platform, and following this approach, an institutional repository or a data source registered in OpenAir Providers Portal. And then server-side software is offered in the form of plugins for various versions of the space or patches for reprints, which are employing Matomo's HTTP API. We are also offering a generic Matomo tracker, which operates on web server logs in order to collect usage activity from other platforms. Just to mention that we do not use Matomo native tracker in order to avoid missing indirect requests. For example, if a request for a PDF in a repository is coming via Google Scholar, Matomo's native PHP tracker will not count it, while our server-side software will properly recognize the request and track it correctly. Users' activity is tracked and logged at Matomo platform in real time, and IP anonymization is also offered as an option to respect the user's privacy. We are also exploiting counter code of practice robots list in order to remove non-legitimate traffic. Information that is collected is transferred offline to OpenAir's databases for statistical analysis that again follows the counter code of practice directives. Statistics are deployed in OpenAir's portals and EOSC portals, and they are also deployed by API endpoint, which are based on a protocol named SUSI-Lite. The second approach follows a pull workflow for gathering of consolidated statistic reports from aggregation services. For example, IRIS UK or La Referencia, which are using protocols such as SUSI-Lite or other REST API interfaces. We are also covering open science journals using a dedicated plugin for OJS platforms. Statistics are stored to OpenAir's database for statistical analysis and are deployed by portals from OpenAir or EOSC, or deployed by endpoints using the SUSI-Lite API. So just to recap, the UsageCounts service feature, we are using the UsageCounts for tracking usage via push workflow or collecting via the pull workflow counter reports. We are anonymized the IPs. We are also exploiting an OpenAir functionality that uses metadata duplication, which enable accumulation of usage for same research outputs. We are counter code of practice compatible and we are providing standard-based user statistics, and we are offering indicators that complement other traditional alternative biometric indicators to provide a comprehensive and recent view of the impact of academic resources. So how can you participate? How can you join the service? First, you have to visit the providers, OpenS Providers Portal, register your repository as Andreas shown. Then you have the option to enable metrics for the selected data source from this page. And on your side, you have to download the tracking code for your platform. You can configure the tracking code according to the instructions and then deploy the tracking code in your data source software. And from our side, we will validate the installation of the tracking code and inform your manager accordingly. So if you enable the service, you will download the related tracking software and the configuration parameters. As mentioned, this patch for various versions of the space, plugin for reprints, and the Python script for all other cases. So this is how raw usage events are collected in real time. This is a view only for UsageCounts service administrators, and we use it initially to validate the content provider and then to monitor the provider usage activity. And as mentioned in the description of the push workflow, we are transferring this raw usage activity. We are processing using the counter code of practice directives, and then we build and store the user statistics in our databases. From there, we are deployed to portals or deploy them via API endpoints. So two examples of how the service is deployed. At the level of the data source, the research product accounting calculates and deploys the monthly views and downloads for a particular data source. In this example for B2Share, you can see how the monthly views have been calculated, and similarly we have a graph for the monthly downloads for this particular data source, and we have a similar example. A similar visualization is offered for an individual research product, in this example for a dataset, whereas the monthly views and downloads indicate the evolution of the impact of this item in particular for this particular research dataset. We are also offering counter code of practice release 4 reports. We are offering 5 different release 4 reports: article report, item report, repository report, book report, and 2 different of book reports. Now, the upcoming updates that I would like to mention, the implementation of the upcoming updates involve the implementation of counter code of practice new release, the release 5. All the concepts that we have discussed so far are following the counter code of practice release 4, and the new release somehow changes completely the way the usage events are collected, counted, and published. So I will try to explain what are the new metrics and the reports for this release. I will provide some examples and the comparison between the release 4, which is currently offered by the UsageCounts service, and the upcoming release 5, which is now in beta and will be offered in the next month. I will also discuss new concepts that are introduced, like the data types, the access method, the access type, and the year of publication. So first of all, the new metric types. We have to forget the traditional views and downloads and move to the new terms of release 5, which are investigation and request. So an investigation is tracked when the user performs any action in relation to a content item or a title, and the request is specifically related to viewing or downloading the full content item. So we have to discard the old concept of user downloads, which are offered, have been defined in the counter release 4. So new metrics are also using the suffix unique and total to further categorize the metric types, and we have 4 different types. We have the unique item investigations, which counts unique item investigation and request inside the user session. We have the total item investigation, which counts total number of times information related to an item that has been viewed, include all article full content views. We have the unique item request, which counts unique article full content views in a given session regardless of the format. If a user, for example, views an article PDF and HTML in the same session, this would only count as one unique item request. And we also have the total item request, which counts all article full content views across all formats like HTML and PDF, and which this is the only equivalent to the release 4 downloads count concept. So to give an example scenario, let's assume that we have a researcher named Susan, which is researching the history of Porto in the Umino repository. And from a list of search results, she opens 3 article abstracts. So we have 3 total item investigations and 3 unique item investigations. And after reading the abstracts, Susan decides to download the PDF for 2 of these articles. And then the count changes to total item investigation to 5. So since we have 3 views and 2 downloads, we have 3 unique views. So we have 3 unique item investigations, and we have 2 total item requests and 2 unique item requests. So the total item requests are considered important for providers that have full text content and report the number of full text downloads or views. The total item investigation provides a big picture perspective of the total number of investigations, while the unique investigation requests are considered powerful metrics for identifying activities with unique item and titles, and they are considered most accurate for cost per use analysis. A quick introduction to the data types. The data types identify the general type of content being accessed or which for usage is being reported. Again, it's article, book segment, collection, etc. The access type describes the nature of access control that was in place when the content item was accessed. For example, if it's open access gold APC, open access gold non-APC, etc. The access method is an attribute indicating whether the usage-related investigation requests were generated by human user browsing or by text and data mining processes. This is an interesting concept. So we have regular and TDM access methods. And the year of publication for the is the year of publication for the content item accessed. If content is available in print and online format, the publication date of these 2 formats differ. The year of publication of the print will be used. And so in terms of reports, we have a reduced number of reports, and all counter release 4 reports have either been renamed or eliminated in favor of other counter release 5 report options. This is the list of the available counter release 5 reports. And in usage account service, we have implemented 4 different reports, which are the main reports. We have the platform master reports, which is a report summarizing usage activity for the data source by month, metric type, and item type. We have the platform usage report, which summarizes usage activity for the repository by month, broken down by metric type, investigations, requests, etc. A report for items request by month, metric type, item time, and repositories, the platform master item reports. And finally, we have the datasets report, which is a report specifically for datasets requests by month, metric type, and repository. The final report is not included officially in the counter release 5, but has been introduced by Make Data Count initiative for reporting user statistics for datasets explicitly. And this is an example of how a counter code of practice release 5 report in this particular scenario, the platform report can be collected. We can specify the data range, the item identifier, and the metric type, and request the report. And this is a sample of this of the output of this report. We have the platform, the data type, the access method, and the metric type, and the reporting period total. So just to recap, EOSC accounting for research products is an easily configurable and robust service. It follows counter code of practice standards, release 4 and soon release 5. For providers, operates as an umbrella system that will provide information on the impact of the data source by integrating usage data and offering comparable analytics of the repository's content across the open infrastructure. And for research products, allows aggregated use statistics on the research products from repositories all over the world and beyond the EOSC ecosystem. So thank you. This is all from me, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Very many thanks, Dimitris, for your presentation about UsageCounts and how to measure the impact of research products. So now we have time for questions, so feel free to add them. in the chat or in the Q&A, or just raise your hand to speak. We have a question from David. Will the UsageCounts be used also in OpenAir?
Yes, yes. Okay, yes, this is the main service also offered by OpenAir for counting usage events.
Thank you, Dimitris. If you have some questions on how to enable the UsageCounts, or regarding the use of some of the reports that Dimitris presented, feel free to ask. If you need some help regarding the parameterization of or configuration of the tracker ID in repository side, you can also contact Dimitris. Sometimes some repository managers send some requests about this, and so feel free to contact. In the meantime, I have a question for Dimitris. This service in the EOSC context is visible in the EOSC Marketplace as a service.
Yes.
Okay, but for example, in the providers dashboard, in the EOSC providers dashboard is not visible. For example, we do not have an option for the data source manager to enable or to access the service. So they always need to go to the OpenAir Provider dashboard and enable the services. And just to clarify, it's okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The service is only configured and someone can register the service only by OpenAir Provide.
By OpenAir Provide. Okay. So the first step is always the same. You need to register your repository or other kind of data source in OpenAir Provide.
Yeah.
And then you will find the option, the menu UsageCounts, and you can enable the service. You will
yes, because
because
the service operates on OpenAir Graph. So it counts the research products that are entities on OpenAir Graph. So this is the main requirement. First, participate in OpenAir Graph somehow, and then enable the service.
Other relevant topic, just to highlight the part that Dimitris highlighted, that these metrics will be visible not only in the OpenAir portals, but also in the EOSC Marketplace. So when data source managers are seeing their entry in the EOSC Marketplace, as well as the research products, the metrics are also visible there in the EOSC Marketplace. And the reports, the detailed reports, are accessible via the OpenAir Provider dashboard.
Yeah.
So we have time for more questions. So feel free to add. If in the future you have some questions about this service, you can use also the OpenAir helpdesk email. I'm putting again in the chat. Melissa, please.
I have another question that probably most repository managers and institutions would come across, but later. So, for example, theoretically, I have a repository and I'm onboarding my repository to the EOSC Provide and to, as a service, as a data source to the EOSC Marketplace. and I don't choose to provide to connect the accounting system. So theoretically, it is possible, I guess, to have records from my repository visible in the EOSC Marketplace without this accounting data, basis downloads, and other metrics. This is an optional feature. That's the point of the question.
Yes, it is optional, but as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, you will have a number of benefits by joining the service. So.
Yeah. I can only say that the EOSC Future project will provide a self-paced course about the integration. We will work with Dimitris to provide a course that will guide you to the process of integration. And also I can confirm that we've been using this regardless of the EOSC Marketplace. We've been using this for repositories in Serbia. They are all integrated, yes, and it was very interesting to discover that quite opposed to our expectations, some repositories that have the content that is almost purely in the national language and almost purely in our one of our local alphabets are more used, and they have higher accounting statistics than some other that might look more attractive in an international environment, and that's been quite an encouragement for researchers. So when we show that we have a repository with 3 million downloads, and the content is 90% of the content is in the local language, that means something. So it's very useful, and it's a very good tool for repository managers also to showcase their work and their efforts.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing this experience. It's always useful.
Here we are demonstrating in a beta environment. For the demo purposes, we are using this environment, and we assume that we already have onboarded the provider. So first we log in into this environment, and my credentials were already saved, so it was a simple click and log in. Then we go to provider section, click on my providers, and here we see provider Unibilefield already onboarded as for demonstration purposes. It's a dummy provider. We click on the add first service button, and we get an option to onboard various entities. Here we choose the data source, and then we can select data source profile via OpenAir. Using the search feature, we can choose Zurich Open Repository as a data source profile. When we select this profile, then some of the fields are already filled from that profile, and the mandatory fields, they are mentioned as with the asterisk, so we can fill some of them. And as we are filling the mandatory fields, on the left hand side in the blocks, we can see the numbers, which shows that these mandatory fields are still unfilled and needs our attention. So once all the mandatory fields for that specific block is filled, we see a check mark next to that block. I think we will not go through all of these blocks because they are easy to understand, but I would like to focus on the data source blocks, which are from 13 onwards. Here we have some mandatory fields such as persistent identity entity type. So in this case, it's research data, and the scheme we can DOI we can choose, and then this is institutional level data source, and this is a repository. Again, research data, and then here we can choose whether this data source belongs to a specific theme or it's a multi-theme data source. So we can select here no, because it's not a specific theme. Then we have to choose the license URL, and we can say it's a Creative Commons. Then we can put in the URL for the Creative Commons, and it's CC Creative Commons 0. And here we can choose which access type is it. If it is an open access, in this case, we can choose open access. And then in the last block, we have the same research product metadata license. We can again put the Creative Commons CC 0. And yeah, this is the last block for this web form for our data source. And once we have filled all the mandatory fields in all the blocks, then there appears apply button in the top, and this submits our application for the data source onboarding, and then it is reviewed by us in the ePort. So now over to Andreas. He would like to show about the research product.
Thank you, Zabil. So then let me share. So after you onboard your data source in EOSC, you can go to OpenAI Provide dashboard, provide.openai.eu, sign in with your credentials. I use ones from OpenAI. I prepared. It is also a beta environment, so for presentation purposes. And after you log in into Provide, you see okay. That's the one for it's a real-time live. It's working shortly before the presentation begins, but it's a little bit crazy. I'm sorry for this. So, okay. Hopefully here we are. So in this case, first of all, you can check if your repository endpoint is OpenAI compliance ready. So you can validate your endpoint regarding literature, institutional and thematic repositories or data repository guidelines. We choose for this the literature or institutional thematic guidelines. You can provide your endpoint in the form here for compatibility tests. Try this one And now you can figure out the guidelines that I'm showing before, literature guidelines for institutional thematic repository version 4 must be changed here, and click next, and afterwards you can select all metadata records should be validated from your endpoint or a custom number like 100 or so, and finish your validation request here. In this case, the validation has begun. You will inform this via email, and during this one, oops, you see here I put the Zurich Open Repository endpoint in this form, and this job is ongoing. And after the validation is successfully finalized, then we will see the different guideline fields, or fields from the guidelines that are mandatory and so on, and also some scores of these repository. And you can take a detailed look on the validation here for your endpoint. But I would like to show you the registration itself. It provides on the registrations part of the repository. For the example repository from Switzerland, we choose country Switzerland. Choose here the Zurich Open Repository archive. Take next. Then the form are also pre-filled for description, longitude, some other elements, and we should only provide here an admin or an email address. In this case, I use our help desk address for this. You should try to connect type next. Oh, some endpoints are given at OpenAir, but we see also the endpoint from Zora that I previously validate on a set of resources I can choose from this repository endpoint. I will take a closer look to OpenAir. And after this, this endpoint could is compliant with OpenAir guidelines version 4. Please let me version 4.0 guidelines, click next. It's on beta. It's to investigate that some of the interfaces are not given yet is a good example. Okay, but if you properly here one, sorry, click next. Interesting.
It seems the message is about the base URL on the right.
Interface, yes. But the base URL is the same as I put before. Anyway, so if you could choose next, then you will see the term of use once, and you could agree with this for the full text harvesting or not, and finalize this one. And afterwards, we will get an information about your registration of your endpoint, and take a closer look to the compatibility level on your endpoint as well. And if there are any smaller issues that you have seen before in your results here, like especially some dedicated fields that you try to look on, it is the aggregation system is not so strict as the validator is. So to say, we have the possibility to integrate your endpoint if the common guidelines are respected. In this case, I would like to thank you, and hopefully it gives a short insights of the registration of an endpoint in the Provide dashboard. And if you have any further questions, Andrea has shared also the email address for the OpenAir help desk, and we will assist you soon on your request. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Andreas and Sabil, for this demonstration.
So, and if you have if you've seen any further or additional messages that you are seen in my presentation in the live beta as well, please contact us, and we will get back to you soon to solve issues on our side as well. And I would like to thank you for your participation.
Okay, thank you. So if we do not have additional questions, I think we can close this workshop. And now it's we will close. And I would like to thank you again, all the speakers, Andreas, Milica, Sabil, and Dimitris, all the participants. And we will try to make this presentation visible in the EOSC portal as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.